So I thought a quick review for this book, The Wim Hof Method. I'm giving this book a high 3, might even end up giving this a 4. The reason is that definitely an interesting idea that he has, his method. I didn't like some part of the method, was not great, but the main idea that cold water is good for you and stressors are good for you, and the fact that life, being or living life in a comfort way is not always a good thing for us, even though that's what we feel like is the good thing for us. So stressors, basically, that's the main premise of the book. And I like that idea even before listening to the book, so that was kind of confirmation for me. And it was also interesting to read about his willingness or his braveness, I would say, of doing things that are really hard and goes against what we consider comfort. But the other parts of the book, I wrote some things I didn't like about the book in the notes, but he's talking about himself a little too much, I would say. And some of the ideas there, I kind of have a hard time with. There is some kind of a part of religion and some magic that he ascribes to his methods. That's why I'm leaning more towards a 3. But without it, it was really interesting, and we would definitely get a 4 without those parts that I wasn't appreciative of. But definitely an interesting. I would recommend listening, listening or reading the book. Just it's an interesting something to entertain. Let's see the notes. In hyperthermia, we want to sleep, which is where the danger lies. That's the problem. Hypothermia, we want to sleep. And if you go to sleep, that's it. I think it's hypothermia, not hyperthermia. That should be hyperthermia. 2 to 3 degrees away from 98.6 is dangerous. So 98.6 is the normal temperature. And 2 to 3 degrees away from it, higher or lower, is dangerous. Our cardiovascular systems are working overtime when lack of stimulation is present. That's the problem when we live comfortable, when we seek comfort. The cardiovascular system is working overtime. Cold water helps blood flow better. It increases blood flow, and which is good for our health. Better blood flow helps deliver nutrients to all parts of the body. That's part of why good blood flow is important, because blood is basically nutrients going around, and you want it to go to all parts of the body and not leave any parts out. 1 to 2 minutes of cold water after a warm shower is enough. That's all it needs. Just 1 to 2 minutes of cold water is already beneficial. Fixing the stomach and flexing the stomach and chest muscles can increase heat in those areas. So when it is cold outside, one of the things that he recommends is to breathe deeply and hold and flex the stomach and chest muscles to increase heat in those areas. And that's where the core temperature lies. Going into cold water is believing in our body to do the job, because sometimes we think, oh, it's too cold. In our minds, it seems impossible, but we need to just to do it and trust our bodies. One breathing method is breathing deeply into the stomach and letting go 30 times. That's the main breathing method he introduced, is breathing deeply to the stomach and then expanding the chest as well, and do that and letting go, obviously, but do that for 30 times. One important thing that he recommends also to do it while laying or sitting, that if we lose consciousness because of the over inhalation of oxygen, we're not gonna injure ourselves. Stopping the breath after those exercises is revealing. One thing he recommends is to stop breathing and kind of getting into he says is sub consciousness, situation. It's I haven't tried that specifically. It sounds a little weird, but definitely some revealing. I would imagine that could be done under those extreme situations. Breathe deeply through the stomach and fill your lungs as well. That's how we should breathe, generally speaking. Breathe deeply through the stomach first, and then fill the lungs as well. Trying to squeeze the breath to the head can relieve headaches. So it's kind of like weird at first when I heard that. I was like, what? How do you squeeze the breath? But it's possible. It's kind of getting the breath higher in. And he says that can relieve headaches, and generally it's good breathing technique. Holding the breath for 5 seconds is an essential part of the method. Is holding it for 5 seconds in, I think, and also out without hair. According to the author, the method can cure hangovers. That part I was not as that wasn't one of those questionable parts that, and generally that's what bothers me a little bit of in this book, that he says or he claims that this method helps everything. So this is kind of like, one of those one size fits all, which is always problematic. And curing hangovers, it sounds a little far-fetched and an overreach. Cold water sync the brain with the body. That's what cold water does. We kind of like, there's no two separate. We kind of sometimes we think we live in our heads too much, and what happens with cold water, we get in sync. Side note, the author complimented himself too much. Definitely give himself a lot of compliments. You might argue that he deserves it, but I always find it a little bothersome that the author is doing it to himself. Wim was able to increase the temperature of his hands upon request. Definitely a very, I wouldn't say important, but quite an ability. Even though the skin temperature drops, the core temperature stays constant. So sometimes we feel our skin or some parts of our body are cold, but the thing is that the core temperature is the important thing, and oftentimes it stays constant, even though we feel our hands and other parts of our body are cold. Another form of breathing is through the belly and chest, releasing, holding it there until the point of inhaling and holding it again. So the emphasis here is staying without hair, basically. So in and out a few times until our body absorbs some oxygen, and then holding it there after the release. And when inhaling slowly and holding it again with the hair inside. Side note, the author is a little bit too pushy. I personally am not a very appreciative of pushy writing and pushy authors when they're kind of like giving you a little too much. You could do this, you can do this, you're strong, you're this. I don't like this type of writing. Breathing helps muscle repair. There is more oxygen, and that helps to repair muscles. More and deeper breathing makes the blood more alkaline. And that's important sometimes to make the blood more alkaline. It's not about muscle. Even small muscles can endure a lot. Sometimes we think about it's all about the size, but he says that with the right breathing, the muscles can endure more. So it's not about the size, it's also about how much that muscle can endure. Using your breathing during sex can enhance performance, so he recommends do that during sex because that could enhance the experience. For pain, breathe deeply and let it go. The pain is telling us a change needs to be done or is undergoing. So he also recommends to use that for pain. Similar method. Generally, he says that the thing about pain is that it tells us that a change has to be made, so we should make that change, or there is undergoing change, and also breathing could help both. in cold water, don't do the method. Rather, breathe deeply and slowly exhale because there is the danger of injury. You can fall, you can get hyperthermia, you can get a muscle spasm and drown. So don't do that in cold water. Rather, breathe deeply and slowly exhale. So slowly breathing and exhaling, but do it deeply. According to the author, trauma is passed through genes. Another questionable, I'm not sure how well founded this idea is that trauma is passing through our genes. Another form of breathing is at the last breath tensing where the tension is and eventually let it go. So that's when we have tension somewhere, easy breathing. At the last breath, tensing where there is some tension, kind of like flexing it and letting it go, and that's supposed to help with some tension in areas. And we have the last one here. Breathing 15 to 20 times a minute is considered being stressed. So we should check how many times we breathe a minute, and if it's more than 15 to 20 times, that's considered stressed. And then we should do the exercise and relax a little bit. So that is for the notes. Again, there are some interesting parts. I would recommend. I do enjoy it, and I think he has this idea of cold shower a day keeps the doctor away, which this is something I'm doing for quite a few years now, and I really recommend. Even before reading this book, I really recommend doing that. So just even if you're not into cold waters and all that, I would still recommend listening to it just to get some ideas about stressors and all of that. Thank you.